Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us today in the world. Super excited today to be bringing this webinar, Creating Personal Digital Experiences and Strengthening Culture at MUFG. We're going to bring to the virtual stage very soon Oonagh Shiel, who we're very excited to meet and get some great information around how they transformed the digital experience for all employees at MUFG EMEA. Before we dive in, a little bit about me. My name is Greg Stortz. I'm the Director of Engagement here at Interact, and I've been working with intranets for longer than I should be admitting. So it's one of our passions here at Interact. We've helped many customers take on some of the hardest and most complex digital workplace creations and we really help people just make it a simple experience and take a lot of that guesswork out of what it takes to make a digital experience for your employees that they'll love. So with that, you're using this wonderful tool called Big Marker, and we've been using it for some time, and we absolutely love it. I just want to run through some housekeeping because we would like this webinar to remain, I apologize for that, as interactive as possible. So on your right-hand side, you should have a chat panel and a Q&A panel, and that's there for you to say a few words. You can comment throughout this entire process, and you can ask your questions in the Q&A panel. Now, if you have questions, ask them away throughout this entire thing, and we will get to them in a priority manner. Now, if you don't have any questions, still go over and look at that Q&A panel because you'll have this opportunity to upvote the questions that have been already asked, and we'll be answering them together in a priority sequence. So if you want to give the chat a good old test, you can let us know where you're dialing in from today and say hello to your fellow peers. And with that, and I should also say, because this is the number one question we do get, yes, this whole session is recorded, and yes, we will be providing you a copy of that recording once it completes. So no worries on that front. But with that, I do want to introduce Oonagh Shiel, Head of Digital at MUFG. Let's bring her to the virtual stage, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Oonagh, if you can, and tell us a little bit about you, what you do for MUFG, and maybe what is MUFG and what are you doing for the global workforce? So I'll leave it to you.
So thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. So I'm Oonagh Shiel. I'm Head of Digital on the comms side at MUFG EMEA. MUFG EMEA, or MUFG, is a Japanese bank whose roots date back more than 350 years, and they've had an overseas presence since 1880. So a long and storied past. I've been there about 4 years. I come from a project management and product ownership background, and I run with my team the digital channels at MUFG EMEA.
That's amazing. Thank you. This is quite the challenge, right? You're Japanese bank working in EMEA, and I know you're across North America as well. What's that like culturally to I know we're hanging out in the Western culture, as you would, mixing that in with some Japanese culture. What's the dynamic like?
Well, it's fascinating dynamic, to be honest, Greg. It's got the best of both cultures, I would say. There's a wonderful, strong tradition of compromise seeking and good teamwork at MUFG. And also then in EMEA, then you have perhaps a slightly more driven way of doing things. So it's the magic is in that compromise between the two cultures, I think. Absolutely.
I'm sure we're learning from both all the time, right? From both fronts.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Absolutely.
And workforce wise, so what's it like there? Are you hybrid? Are you all desk based? What's it like to work at MUFG?
So we have a hybrid structure now since the pandemic, and that's working really well for us. And our intranet has been a key part of helping employees deal with that. So it's accessible wherever they are. It's responsive design means that whatever device people are joining from, then it gives a good user experience. So yeah, we're very happy with the hybrid culture.
No, I love that. Now, look, I want to talk about, let's dive and start at least with the journey. So You haven't always been with Interact, so it wasn't your original software of choice, but in fact, I believe you shared with me earlier, you were on an instance of SharePoint. Can you take us through maybe the history of an intranet for MUFG and up until today?
Okay, so we did have some non-sharing across our entire estate. So we had one intranet for one side of the company, another intranet for the other side of the company. Nobody saw across into each other's intranets. We had two very old SharePoint intranets that where the content ownership perhaps and the governance wasn't maintained as clearly as it could have been. So when we picked up this project in 2019, 2020, we really had to do quite a bit of clearing up to make sure that what we carried across to our new Interact intranet was really the useful and usable content that employees needed to do their jobs effectively.
And I think you've shared two screenshots. Let me just jump to the next slide here. So I'm looking at, am I looking at both of these intranets that you guys were running simultaneously?
Yes, you are. And they had very hierarchical structure. So, you know, there were many nestled departments. Each department effectively had their own intranet, mini intranet site. Very hierarchical, as I said, very kind of sequential. So user experience, the user was expected to navigate, go from here to here to here to here. So we turned that on its head with our intranet, with our new intranet.
So what were the major reasons for leaving SharePoint to jump over to the side of Interact?
So we felt like the pandemic, of course, forced us to really try to create a virtual office because
Sure.
we didn't know when we'd be back in the physical office again or what that might be like. And we felt that the Interact intranet offered the best of this. So it was the social aspects were there, the responsive design was there, and the overall user experience was one that lended itself to this new hybrid work from home, work from the office kind of future that we were envisaging back in 2019, 2020.
Right. Now you are working for a heavily regulated industry, right? So there's a lot of hoops you're jumping through to get change to happen. And so what kind of complexities were there for you in this project to go from SharePoint to an out-of-the-box solution like Interact?
Well, certainly, as you can imagine, the data privacy aspects were huge. So, in the UK, we have two regulators, of course, across EMEA.
Right.
We're operating in, very heavily regulated markets. So we had quite a bit to do on the employee privacy side.
Sure.
And we also had quite a lot to do on the technical side. Everything had to be shut off, completely secure, really just, it had to be fortress-like, I would say.
Right. And I'm assuming because you got to today, you were successful. It was, we were able to shine light on all those areas for you to make sure it was possible, which is great.
Absolutely. And we did have a drive towards a one MUFG culture as well. So two old SharePoint intranets are not going to help you drive one culture. So our intranet is now available across the region, across EMEA and international security. So that's the US and APAC as well. And that, so we can permission content, we can lock it down where it's necessary. But really our driver has been to have everything available to everyone everywhere.
Absolutely. That's amazing. And we all know that even managing one intranet is a task. I could only imagine what it would have been like to be managing two. So that's good for you. Good for you. So fast forward to today, you're now on an Interact platform, and I think we have a screenshot with some edits to it to make sure we're keeping things private and secure. But this is your new intranet. What did you name it?
Well, we called our intranet KIZUNA, which is a Japanese word that means the ties or connections between people.
I love that. I love that. So And you brought the culture from Japanese into your intranet, which is amazing to keep that alive. So you've consolidated two intranets into one. What is this new intranet to your employees?
So it's a one-stop shop. It's the single source of truth. It is the place where people check out who's doing what the latest news is, how to access their policies and procedures, how to find people in the people directory.
Right.
It really is, it's our virtual office.
I love that. You mentioned earlier that you stood up this new intranet throughout a pandemic. What was that like? How did you get stuff done while all trying to keep safe and away from each other?
Yeah, so we were always away from each other. So there was never that, that big workshop in a meeting room with lots of Post-it notes. That never happened. So what we did.
No Post-it notes. Yeah.
No Post-it notes were involved in the making of this intranet. But we took along 5 key launch partners because we knew that those 5 key launch partners were the biggest contributors of content. We knew that. So we brought them with us. We had a steering committee. We met regularly. We really focused on those, getting the content for those key launch partners correct. The rest, we knew we would have to kind of work a bit harder to bring along in a remote way. And at a time when really everybody's workloads were heavy and, a new intranet faced with, such strong headwinds at the time, having a new intranet possibly wasn't top of everybody's list. So we knew that to get these 5 key launch partners happy, that was the main business. And then we knew that afterwards we would bring people along with us. So we were never going to kind of stop the momentum either.
Absolutely. To go back to the beginning of this, I know we moved into the today, but to go back into the past, how did the decision come to be to migrate? Was there a person in the organization that was like, enough's enough, or was it a collective group? Was it data? Who hit the go button on the decision to change an intranet?
I think the key driver was our then head of communications. Really, what we had wasn't able, it just wasn't delivering from a communications perspective. There was no way that 2 aging SharePoint intranets could have provided the kind of the firepower for an effective communication strategy.
Of course.
So we had excellent support from communications on that.
I love that. And I mean, that really resonates with me as an internal communicator, because I know as the business changes, your intranet needs to. And of course, there are a lot of tools out there that, their roadmaps are their roadmaps and they change. But sometimes they're not meant to, work the way the business needs to work. So I completely understand the need to leap out and look at other opportunities. So that's fantastic.
And also, Greg, there was a drive from within the business to, move from a hierarchical structure to more a functional structure. So that's why we came up with these 5 buckets of content, and they were very much based on what the user needs to do. So we really tried to kind of match the push of an intranet with the pull of the user. So we were trying to get that dynamic working.
That's amazing. And in today's world, what does it look like from a managing of KIZUNA? Like, how many authors do you have, and how many people are tackling this on a day-to-day basis?
So, well, we have many thousands of users. We have put a self-service model in place. So our team is quite small, but we have tried to empower the users to, own, manage, and really take accountability for their own content. And this is where the Interact intranet really helps us with the content authorship, the life cycle of content, and just how, you really need to get a name at the top of the web page.
Right.
You've got a chance then of keeping the content alive and your intranet thriving.
Amazing. So KIZUNA goes live, new intranet, everyone's feeling great. so great that it starts to shift culture within the organization a little bit, so much so that I believe you were nominated for two awards in your own organization. One of them for strengthening culture, and the other one was streamlining efficiency. But you actually took home an award for strengthening culture, which is a huge undertaking, because if we look at culture, this is tough. Like culture is hard to change. It's hard to create. I mean, it's grown from the people upwards. So quite the ripple KIZUNA made inside of MUFG. Winning these awards. Tell me a little bit about the awards. I think we have some screenshots of the celebration that was made on your intranet here.
That's right. So that was 2021. Yeah. So we were delighted. The team was delighted to be nominated in 2 categories. And then we were like beyond happy to have won in the strength and culture category. So this was really about opening up the culture to the employees, having the employees be able to pull from that a little bit more effectively than they had been. It was about transparency, just like stepping up and growing, being able to be more accountable and working better as part of a team, I would say. So we were able to break down some silos, and we're seeing, some really wonderful open conversations on content, more collaboration between users, and just a more kind of open flow of information throughout the organization, I would say.
That's incredible. So MUFG for the first time is now able to use an intranet to see each other. Pretty much, they break down these barriers of not being able to communicate or see each other, for that matter.
Certainly, KIZUNA has been like a glass door we've been able to step through, for sure. And in our region, yes, the drive has very much been on everything is open to everybody everywhere, unless there's a specific business reason why I shouldn't see something that somebody else has produced. But that's been the driver: openness and transparency.
That's incredible. Now, I know when we spoke before this webinar, you shared stories around it starting to change how DE&I was handled, and some even proper use cases of a profile was changing the way employees were seeing each other. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, just for anybody who's interested in improving their employee voice?
So we have a hugely diverse DEI cohort in the organization. Lots of content, lots of events, lots of really fantastic role models as well. And a lot of people are using their own people directory profiles to highlight their own DEI credentials. So I think there's a slide later on about people using it for highlighting their membership of a particular campaign. People are using it to indicate their passions, how they've volunteered, who they've worked with, where they've gone. And we have been able to use the kind of flexible open platform to be able to create some bespoke content pages as well, to really like just paint the whole DEI in a fresher, more open way.
Of course, I love that. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the life in KIZUNA world. One of the things I'm interested in knowing is what does it take to, actually, I do have a slide here just to remind us what the word KIZUNA means from the Japanese description. What does it take to keep this intranet up and running? How many is on your team, first and foremost, to keep the digital workplace up and alive?
So there's 2 of us, and we don't just work on KIZUNA. We handle all of the digital channels.
Right.
So we have enabled quite a large number of admins. We've really, we're not able to resource all requests ourselves. We don't have any one central intranet manager team. So we have enabled people with admin permissions, and we've trained up, and we've asked them to train. So we've used the trainer model as well. So this has really been about, you know, having a very diffuse kind of ownership and pushing back as much as possible to the owners as well.
Right, which can be very difficult sometimes, I know, because it's usually the owners of content this is not their full-time job, right? So we're always, yeah.
It's not their full-time job, but luckily it's such an intuitive platform. People don't need much in the way of training.
Sure.
I mean, a lot of them have had nothing in the way of training and have done just fine.
That's amazing. That's good to hear. That's great. So on the side of KIZUNA, again, you know, it's living up to its name. It sounds like it's living up to its name. You're having more connection. People are finding themselves closer. And you did share some screenshots with us, and let's take a look at those screenshots, because I wanted to. I think one of them was your culture space. Go ahead. I'll let you take the floor here to describe these images. What are we looking at?
Sure. So culture on the left, it was some bespoke content. And you can see that probably doesn't look like a typical intranet page, but we were able to create some new imagery, use the kind of open and flexible platform to have this like big impactful image on the page. Mm-hmm. So that's culture. And then one of my favorite features on the intranet is the user forum. And on the right, this was a great example of how users have kind of taken it upon themselves to jump in and answer other users' questions. So this kind of diffuse model is really working very well for us. So we can use this user forum to get information out there as a point of contact with users. And then the users are empowered to answer each other's questions. It takes it away from the KIZUNA team altogether.
Incredible. So this forum, I believe, was your launch of Microsoft Teams within your organization, which we all know comes with minimal, if anything, training, right? So a lot of organizations just go, here, good luck, here's some Teams. So what I loved about this is that you actually stood up a forum for some community abilities for them to help each other in that implementation to get best practices, but also ask their questions, hopefully reducing some tech support tickets as well.
Absolutely, yes, and that's just one of the user forums we have. We've got another one called "Ask Me Anything About KIZUNA," and we seeded that with a lot of kind of questions that we were trying to get ahead of the users. And the beauty of this is that, you know, the language is normal. People can just type it into the search engine, and these answers will be returned. So it's not like a user is not going to be able to find the information they're looking for. They don't have to wade through a lot of stuff. If they want to know is, can I screen share in Teams, that they will type that into the search and then get this answer, which is hopefully shorter, more concise, and friendlier than reading through a policy or some kind of PDF.
So community sourced content. I love this.
Absolutely.
Always helpful.
Absolutely. From the ground up.
I love it. On the other side, so we have two other screenshots. So I think you already alluded to the one on the left with sharing a little bit more about you and your profile. That's what we're looking at, right?
Yes, that's right. So that was me at a volunteering day as part of our CSR last Christmas time. Okay. And that's just, I mean, I used myself because I didn't want to use anybody else. But that's just an example of how users are just taking that space that's devoted to them in their people directory and using it to say, this is what I'm interested in. This is what I'm doing. It's a really fantastic way of rounding out an employee.
Amazing. Out of all of this, so a lot of incredible things have kind of taken on their own kind of characters and you know, personality. But what's your proudest moment inside this implementation of your KIZUNA intranet?
I guess it was one day I was on the trading floor not long after we launched, and I saw a user on the trading floor just typing in the policy he needed, getting it instantly, and then just carrying on. Right.
So just seeing it in action,
knowing it in action. That's a very small example, but it meant a lot to me, because then I knew it was working.
Right.
Because it took us quite a while to land on a central area for policies and procedures.
Right.
It took us quite a while to get to that place where that was acceptable, and users were able to, select exactly what they wanted. So that was a big piece of work for us.
Amazing. So let's talk about the future. So obviously we never want the intranet to stay as it is. So that Interact we have a roadmap. Of course, we're constantly making changes and improvements to the platform, both on the desktop and in the mobile world. But what does your roadmap look like? Maybe also, how do you decide what to implement and what happens next for KIZUNA?
So we're very keen on following the Interact roadmap for sure. So we've been delighted to roll out the block editor recently. That's been a game changer for us. We've been really happy with that. I guess for us, we have to evaluate any new feature to make sure that it's fit for our purposes as well.
Good. Yeah.
We have to make sure that the business is ready for it. Our employees are. The employee base might be mature enough for that as well. Sure. We need to make sure that we're really getting the most out of our investment as well. So it is really about, implementing what's going to kind of move the needle for us from an employee experience perspective. And yeah, we're looking at the app now. We've been looking at that for a while. Block editor is hugely exciting. And I know that there's something coming in the AI space that we're really excited about learning more about.
Of course. And for everyone on this call wondering, block editor, what does this mean? So Interact has been working on this world-class content creation platform. So our old way of creating content was in a WYSIWYG kind of editor where you could inject HTML, and it worked and it was great. But the world has changed, and we've created from the ground up this amazing block editor experience where dragging pieces onto a page now make it easy for all authors from all walks of life, from all skill sets, to create amazing looking pages, but also give administrators the power to include templates, and even control who can have what blocks and who can see what templates and so on and so forth. So there's incredible things that the block editor has given all authors the capability of doing. And on the AI side of things, actually, I'm very curious, playing in this world, because I'm sure everyone on this call is hearing about AI and wondering how this fits into the workplace, and will we lose our jobs one day to machine authoring, and so on and so forth. So the answer on the block editor side is yes, we have created an AI block, which will allow you to write a few things and tell us a little bit about what you're trying to create, and let the block editor kind of design a page for you. What are your thoughts on that, Oonagh? Where do you stand? Maybe not speaking on behalf of MUFG, but where do you stand when it comes to AI? How do you see it?
I think it's hugely exciting, especially in terms of content generation, being able to validate your content before you go live with it. I just think it's hugely exciting. It's all about asking the right questions of it, I think, and how we decide we use it.
Absolutely. I think my favorite thing about AI is sometimes when we write something and you just kind of peek into ChatGPT and go like, can you give me more? And it always does. And sometimes you're like, how did I not think of this? So I use it as a tip finder, which is great. But yeah, there's so many use cases for it out there in the world. That's great. Thank you for sharing a little bit about the future. Now, I want to know where 2 years from now, what is KIZUNA for your organization? If you could just take a guess and look into the crystal ball, where do you think KIZUNA is going?
So I would like to see it on. I'd like to see more usage. I would be very excited to see higher use on the search engine, which we know it's now at about 60%. So I'm really curious to see what happens to users, how they access content, because it seems that, the Google model is the way people like to access content now. So I'm really interested in that. You know, I hope the app will be on everybody's phones, and I hope we'll be using that. But we're also looking at integrations where possible, and you know, I'd like to see it as a partner with Teams.
Good.
So yeah, of course, we want more content, more users, and more happier users as well. That's what I'd like to see in 2 years.
Fantastic. So I'm going to dive into some questions here. So let me just switch over. Oh, I skipped too far. I'm so sorry about that. Let's jump over into our Q&A. And again, if you haven't asked your question, get them in. And then if you don't have questions, dive in there and start voting. I can already see many questions in here, some upvotes. So I'm going to do this in an order here. Allegra asks, oh, let's see, this is a little big on my screen, but how do you think about the shift from we will eventually go back to normal to a true digital first workplace experience that equally delivers on experience for employees who are more virtual?
That's a great question.
Good question.
Good question. I think possibly when we're talking about digital first, we also need to think about the analog as well. So I see that being, I see true digital first as being in partnership with the analog experiences that create a truly good employee experience.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the shift is a complete culture overhaul, isn't it? So I think, yeah, we're hearing more and more from customers that we all know there's no more normal. We're actually more into solution for the next. What is it? You know, and I think we're seeing a lot of even changes in our roadmap that are changing our own software to enable employees to be anywhere, work however they need to. You spoke about the mobile app, improvements to that to allow employees to just exist how they need to exist to be successful. You know, and I think on the side of tools and changes to our digital workplace, we're only going to see more improvements to allow our employees to be more flexible, right? I think organization to organization, industry to industry, it's different. And yeah, I like what you're saying, the analog first. I mean, let's take care of those who are you know, customer facing, and their technology may not be the first thing they're jumping towards. But as we, you know, look through the entire workforce, we know that digital, it's here to stay. I think it's proven itself way more than it need to throughout this whole pandemic, and now into the shift of how we are working, that it's actually the way we will continue to work, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot to come in this space, and I think there's a lot to change. So love this question. Thanks for asking. Let me throw, this is from Susie. Could you please talk a little more about your governance and management model? How do you make sure the intranet remains suitable for employees? Who is accountable and responsible for keeping it updated, and how is it enforced? Love this question.
So Susie, that's a great question. And honestly, who's accountable? That's the person whose picture is on the piece of content that they uploaded. I really 100% ownership of the content is the only way to do this. Luckily, intranets enforce a life cycle. So we have, for example, we've enabled the system that content lives for like 3 years, and there's a firm review date. And if the content owner doesn't review the content, then all users get a message at the top of that piece of content saying, this content should have been reviewed 2 days ago, 40 days ago. Yeah. So there's a, you know, there's a little bit of, it's not naming and shaming, but it's very clearly signaled that this content is the user's responsibility, is the owner's responsibility. Sure. And that, you know, there is a life cycle to that, because it's very difficult in intranets to keep them up to date. We found intranet or Interact is just very, very good at helping us with this.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, there are a bunch of capabilities inside the platform for administrators to constantly do health checks to make sure that so there's a bunch of reports, there's a bunch of analytics that can help you make sure that this content remains up and running. So that's
Yeah.
great.
I would also say the things like comments and how users can suggest keywords to the content owners.
Mm.
It really is a conversation. It's not like a static thing of publish that, it's going to be there forever.
Sure.
I don't care what happens to it. I'm accountable as an owner to all of my colleagues as well.
No, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find, is it difficult for, so let's say you have someone in marketing who's owning a few pieces of content. Do you work with the managers of those people to make sure that they're given the time and space, or have you not needed to? The ownership is just kind of there.
We haven't needed to. It's something we always stress anytime we get in front of users. But we also, we publish monthly dashboards on KIZUNA. And then we do highlight some departments that perhaps they have a lot of expired content.
Yeah.
To surface this, because an overgrown intranet serves nobody. Nobody benefits from this.
It's true. Like spring cleaning on your intranet it's a thing. It is a thing. Absolutely. Great question, Susie. Thank you very much for asking. Matilda also has a question here. So any advice on how you can engage a workforce and invoke excitement about an intranet launch that they've never used one before?
I love this question.
Yeah.
So if we hadn't been running this project in the middle of a global pandemic, we would have done much, much, much more. We would have been standing in front of users much more than we did. What we did, we went out with communications regularly, talking about how the internet is coming. This is what it's going to look like. This is what you're going to be able to do. We got the name KIZUNA because we ran an employee-wide competition. So that's where we got the name. It was sourced. It was a crowdsourced name. And we also leaned on the senior leadership to drive some appetite for this as well within their divisions. So I would think, I think there's no substitute to getting in front of people and talking about it and having drop-in sessions and having a stand in the canteen during the busiest hours, that kind of thing, to really try to build up a sense of excitement about an intranet. But I think it's also a good point because, some generations, the idea of an intranet is, in this app world, it's not like a lot of people are used to this kind of central repository. So I think we're helped by Interact because they have a number of, the social aspect is there, and there are, there's lots of capabilities that I think are useful and used by people in the outside before they get into a workplace setting. So certainly some generations of workers are happy with the idea of an intranet. This is your company website. It's all here. And then others just want to pick the little bits that they need to use every day. And happily, our Interact intranet serves all generations of workers, I would say.
No, that's fantastic. And I think you nailed that. Creating a comms plan around an intranet launch is beyond anything. It's not even just about, reaching the audience, wherever they may be working, but it's also creating this virtual culture, isn't it? So you can't just launch it. There's got to be a what's in it for me. And that's sometimes very difficult, but doing it right could take a lot of time about, gaining that information from the employees and understanding how this is going to improve their work life before going live, and use that information to be part of that campaign to make sure that, that they know what's in it for them and they will want to come see it. And then also in the first couple of weeks, changing that intranet rapidly so that the continuous come back and it's new and come back and there's something different, is always a great way to do that. Well, that's fantastic.
And okay. I think personalized homepages help here as well. So for new users, this is what you need to know for your first 100 days in the job. Serving users where they are is really key, I think.
Yeah, this is a great point. Absolutely. Yeah, if you can design a homepage that is catered to that audience, they'll fall in love faster than you'd imagine. Absolutely. Thanks, Matilda, for this question. Katrina has a question here. Who did you have to get buy-in from before launching this new intranet? Did you come up with the key points of impact and ROI to advocate for this change? I know you covered maybe a few things here, so let's just remind us.
Yeah, so certainly we had great support from our head of comms. She was really, really passionate about this. We had great buy-in as well from our leaders because they saw the benefits of driving a one MUFG, a stronger culture, by having one central intranet for everybody. Certainly we did, we certainly wrote the business case. We proved whatever ROI we could. We ran a very robust procurement exercise as well. So, it was a very, very robust process, I would say.
All right. Katrina, thank you for that question. Stephen has a question here as well. Love the design of KIZUNA. Are there any design or content differences for different user groups or based on security or permissions in your intranet?
So this is a great question. There aren't, because we wanted everybody everywhere to see the same thing because of where we had come from with two separate intranets.
Right.
We have our homepage is the same for all regions, but we've kind of sliced it so that somebody in Paris, for example, sees Paris news. They don't see my news in London. So we've used some light customizations, and there's a ton of cool widgets for homepages. We've also got kind of a pull widget, which means that I select the topics that I'm interested in. So that surfaces on my intranet as well, on my homepage. So we were really keen that it was a mixture of push and pull, so that, we know there are messages that have to be pushed to users, but we also want users to pull the information that they're most interested in. It's something that we're looking at, the idea of different homepages for different users. So now that we've started, we're a couple of years into this, we're really just going to kind of have bespoke content while still under the umbrella of one MUFG.
Right. And interact, there's many ways you can achieve this, right? So I think the one you've chosen was through news being, I'm assuming you've used permissions, so you can put something in a category that's just for Paris, but that widget won't show you any information that you don't have access to, right? So I understand that. But we have permissions on zones with homepages that can hide and show depending on personas or, whether you're in a community or not. There's so many options that can make your homepage adjust and change based on who you are, where you are, and what communities you belong to. So there's so many great options there. I love that. Good. Thank you, Stephen, for your question. Jessica has a question here. When you say you are locking things down from a security perspective, how are you doing that? Is it IP restrictions, user roles, groups, access to pages?
So we have encouraged all content owners to have everything open to everybody everywhere. But we know that in some parts of the business, this is not possible. So for example, some HR information, I shouldn't see what another territory can see. So we have used the permissions that are available on Interact to be able to just specify the audience for particular pieces of content. So that's how we've done that. And some parts of the business have kind of secret areas that I can't see. I mean, I've set them up for these users, but I can't see them going forward, and that they might be, a particular group's own reports or their own dashboard, that they know it's not of huge open interest to everybody.
Sure.
So they've chosen to kind of restrict their content as well. But we have definitely used what is on the Interact platform to be able to restrict content to specific audiences. So we've done that by entity or by location.
Good. And I know, I hope the product team is not going to get angry for me saying this right now. And hopefully, I don't know if it's public knowledge yet, but we do have a new permission model coming out as well, where you'll actually be able to geofence content. So what this means is that anybody who's within a range of a location, you can hide and show content as well. So imagine this for, I mean, retail industry would probably make the best use out of this, being able to say, if you're outside of this store radius, or shop radius, we don't want to show anything that's recipe related or something that's our bread and butter to the organization, keeping some content safe, but allowing the employee to access certain things from home in a safe manner. So more to come on that. So that's fantastic. Great question, Jessica. Thanks for asking. I'll go with one more here. Just before we close off, I have a question from Zoe. I love that your form brings users together, especially encouraging self-service and answering each other's questions. Do you also have Yammer, Viva Engage in your org, or is it your intranet the only comms channel available for this? Love this question.
Yeah, so great question, Zoe. Right now, it is the only comms channel available for this. So, I mean, I know Yammer, I've used it in other organizations, and it's a great tool. Currently, it's only KIZUNA. KIZUNA is the only show in town for this. But we are looking at integrating KIZUNA in an intelligent way with Teams. So we would want, KIZUNA to be a partner with Teams. And we are actively looking at where we can integrate it in an intelligent way that doesn't duplicate functionality, but makes sure that the users, can have a really delightful user experience wherever they are, whether they're on Teams or whether they're on KIZUNA. So that's something we're actively looking at right now.
I love that. Yeah, and I think one of the greatest things we saw come out for Teams from us was the ability to create apps in Teams so that you can actually have your intranet just live inside of Teams if that's where your end users are. To go back to that block editor, one of the major things that changes is the ability to promote content as well. So one of the things that we've spent much time trying to reinvent is how we get to the employees where they're working, right? So whether that is Slack, Yammer, Engage, Viva Engage, whether you're on Teams or you're even WhatsApp, if you have your employees working in these spaces, you'll, through Interact, be able to promote one. So you create and Interact, but we can push to digital signage. We can push it to your WhatsApp groups. We can push it to your Teams groups, wherever your employees are working, allowing you to have a full-on multi-channel experience without having to duplicate everything. And this includes email and such. So many capabilities to at least remove a lot of that extra work that it takes to be an internal communicator with so many channels available to you, not having to replicate everything everywhere. That's fantastic. So thank you, Zoe, for that question. And with that, I do want to thank you so much, Oonagh, for joining us today. I think we've learned so much from your journey and including all of the information you just shared about the future plans for KIZUNA. I have to say, MUFG is a super blessed organization to have somebody like you running the digital workplace for employees. So I want to thank you for all the work that you and love that you pour into the digital experience for employees. Thanks for being here with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody who joined us today.
Yes, thank you to everyone who joined us. Absolutely. If you want to learn more about Interact and how we can enhance and help you with your digital workplace projects, a survey is going to jump up on the screen. Happy to dive more into the MUFG story, but also talk about some of our other customers with you. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, you can always visit us at interactsoftware.com and join our resources area where there's lots of blogs, there's lots of e-guides, and also more webinar content like this. So bookmark that and visit it often. We're always changing things up. So again, thank you, Oonagh, for joining us. Thank you, MUFG, for lending Oonagh to us. And I hope everyone has an incredible rest of your day from wherever you are, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.